to have to be dependent if there's no other source of income.
I think the other data, we have a program in Pennsylvania for essentially all of those who are not taken care of by the AFDC program. It's called a General Assistance Program, and there less than 15% are on more than 18 months. So we have a great turnover. We have essentially young males moving into the welfare system after unemployment compensation and then moving out when a job opportunity comes along. This, I think the notion of generations of people on welfare is a very small minority in the whole system. That doesn't mean that the system as presently defined and as the set of programs that we have put together don't often contradict each other. And I'm the first to agree with Dr. Friedman that some of the programs are conflicting. However, I think it is overly broad to say that we turn people into helpless children.
I don't remember talking to anyone who's ever been on welfare who didn't think they were being treated like children while they were on it.
Of course, one must make a difference, a distinction between the system that was set up to help people and the people who are employed in that system. Look at any public welfare system around the country, and we have practically few trained people to work with people. We employ the ill-trained, people who are not equipped to be helping people. We say they're social workers. They're not social workers. They have neither the skills, the attitudes, and some of them not even the concern. So I think one has to separate out a conceptual framework of a system designed to help people and what the country and community puts into that system to implement those programs.
You mean to separate the hopes from the reality?
I separate the skills that are available in order to implement what the objectives of the program are. And I think we have to separate whether we're talking about program objectives or we're talking about how it operates. I would be the first to say that the system that I administered had ill-prepared people to do the job that we were set up to do. But I would not say that the system that we set up...
I talked to some social welfare people who think that, in fact, they were so hamstrung by the system that there was very little they could do to help people to get off welfare. That is, to build up skills, get jobs, do whatever was necessary to get off welfare. They felt it was the system.
Bob Lappin, you have a comment?
The system that we're stereotyping is one of a great deal of paternalistic interference in individual families' lives. And in fact, isn't this true, Mr. Dumpson? The caseload is so high for an individual welfare worker that they can't do a lot of interfering in individual family lives. Moreover, in the last decade, there's been a real attempt to ease this welfare trap in AFDC by changing the take-back rate and by administering work expenses and child care expenses in such a way as to facilitate work by those who may want to do it. So it's not quite as harsh a picture as we sometimes get, that there is this omniscient welfare worker who's right there in the living room with the family making all their decisions for them.
I've never heard of a government program which was defective, in which the people who ran it didn't say, if only we had more money to spend on what we're not being able to accomplish with the amount we're spending now.
Milton, I'm going to move on now to some of your prescriptions in that film, because I think it's a good ground for discussion. The most drastic one was when you said, speaking of an unemployed man, supposing you were cruel and took away welfare from this man, he would find a job at some wage. There would always be a job he could get. He might need some charity en route, private charity, but he would get a job. Now, I want you to react, those of you, before we come back to Milton on that. Is that a picture that seems plausible to you?
He may get a job, but he may get a job in what we refer to as the underground economy. And that's where a number of our youth are now going to get their jobs. Those activities that are illegal, and the only opportunity they have for earning part of a livelihood.
I think the other issue is that you have a whole group of people who are the single female head of a household. And yes, cut off welfare tomorrow. What will they do? What will be their immediate response? At what price to their small children and to their middle-aged children? Yes, they'll get a job. In fact, the statistics show that women, in fact, are the most successful through the employment program. But what has to supplement that, typically, is the provision of some kind of daycare arrangement. Either the individual woman has to earn enough money to be able to pay privately for her daycare, or in fact she is, quote, subsidized through this insidious, corrupting set of programs run by the federal government, which in fact makes her employable and a taxpayer. It's an interesting notion of trying to get people in a productive mode.
Tom Sowell.
It's incredible the way you start the story in the middle, as if there's a predestined amount of poverty, a predestined amount of unemployment, and that the welfare system is not itself in any way responsible for that.
There is a predestined 20% of the bottom half of the population.
I have never, that's always been true.
There's going to be 20% at the bottom.
Agree with you. It's also true that 20% of the bottom population doesn't have to be living on the government and ruled by the government. You mentioned, for example, the female-headed household. Many of those, in addition to the grown woman who has all the kids, are teenage pregnancies. There's not a predestined amount of teenage pregnancy. I grew up in an era when people, and particularly blacks, were a lot poorer than today, faced a lot more discrimination than today, and in which the teenage pregnancy rate was a lot lower than today. I don't believe there is a predestined amount of teenage pregnancy, a predestined amount of husband desertion. Gutman has done a study of the black family showing that this whole notion that the black family has always been disintegrating, that is nonsense, that his studies go up to 1925, the great bulk of black families were intact, two-parent families up through 1925, and going all the way back through the era of slavery. So it is now only within our own time that we suddenly see this inevitable tragedy which the welfare system says it's going to rush in to solve, but which it is itself a part.
We're talking about a very small group. We're talking about 12% of the families are not intact, are not two-parent families at any one period of time.
I mean among welfare recipients
no,
or the population
among the
at large?
public at large. We're talking about 12% of the families. 12%.
That's right.
That's a small number. But
Well,
there's
none of
still
those on welfare.
We're still talking about a significant component of the bottom 20% that are the bottom 20%. Whether they are above the poverty line or below the poverty line, they are still the bottom 20%. And the issue is, what is the responsibility of the other 80%, if any, toward those individuals?
Does your program plan to eliminate there being a bottom 20%?
No, but it intends to raise the bottom 20%. So
You're raising them by having more illegitimacy, more unemployment. That's
I'm not
how you're
making them
raising
have illegitimate children. I hope that's clear.
Oh, I think, you don't have to do that. You simply subsidize it.
We as human beings don't have a responsibility, but I hope we have a compassion and an interest in the bottom 20%. And I only want to say to you that the capitalist system, the private enterprise system in the 19th century did a far better job of expressing that sense of compassion than the governmental welfare programs are today. The 19th century, the period which people denigrate as a high tide of capitalism, was a period of the greatest outpouring of eleemosynary and charitable activity that the world has ever known. And one of the things I hold against the welfare system most seriously is that it has destroyed private charitable arrangements which are far more effective, far more compassionate, far more person-to-person in helping people who are really, for no fault of their own, in disadvantaged situations.
I have to disagree with you, though, because I think that the whole notion of private property was excluded. Whole segments of society were excluded from the notion of private property in the 19th century, namely women, idiots, and imbeciles. And so I don't go back to the 19th century and hold that up as any paragon that we would want to replicate today.
Anyway, I want Milton now to come to your major prescription, which I know you don't say is on the agenda for tomorrow, but it lies ahead. That is the negative income tax. And I'm not sure people fully understand how it would work. We can't, I think, go into the details of it, but I'd like to get a reaction around the panel, first of all. Is this a viable approach to the enduring problems of poverty? Negative income tax.